Hi everyone, this video is to show you how to create a rubric in Schoology, how to attach it to an assignment and an assessment question, how to use the rubrics, and then how to share the rubrics or save them into your resources. And so lots to cover in this video. There will be chapters, and so feel free to click to the part that's most relevant for you. But we are going to start with creating a rubric. And so the very first thing you're going to need to do is go into a course of your choice in Schoology and go into the grade setup page. You'll notice on the right-hand side that there is a list of scales and rubrics. Rubrics are indicated by this little quad icon. This lists all the rubrics that I've ever created in this course, and so if I want to add a new one, I go to the little Add button and then select Rubric. This window pops up, and I do recommend expanding it as far as possible so that you can see what you're working with. And so I'm going to make a satire critique rubric. My criteria, I'll start with my first one, and I can add a description if I choose to, or not. You can leave it blank, it's up to you. First thing to know is that these numbers represent points, and so they're not the same thing as kind of like the 4, 3, 2, 1 rubrics that we typically have in our Google Doc template type things. This is literally how many points that criteria is going to be worth, and so if you have, for instance, a 30-point assignment, you're going to want to decide which points go with which criteria so that you can divide them up appropriately. And so let's just say that I start off with a 10 here, and then 9, and go all the way down. And I need some more, so I'll just keep adding the little plus here. And 5. And the lowest score I'll give is a 5, and so I'll just leave it at that. You'll see the total points at the end of the column, at the end of the row. And then I'm going to remove these descriptors because I don't want those. I actually want ones that I've pre-written, so I'm translating this rubric, and what I'm going to do is just copy-paste the text, which is what I recommend. And so if you are translating a rubric that you've already created, just having it as a Google Doc on a separate tab is really helpful for just kind of copy-pasting what you need. And so we're going to leave it at that for now. And then I'm ready to make my second criteria, and so I'm going to go to the little plus criteria button at the bottom here, and you'll notice that it duplicates exactly what I had above. Because I'm going to have 3 criteria and I want the second one to also be out of 10 points, I'm going to duplicate it again. It duplicates the most recent thing that you've created, and so what I'm going to do is make this evidence, and then this will be reasoning. And for evidence, I actually don't want 10 points, I only want it to be 2 points, and so I'll just use this little X and remove the ones that I don't want until there's only 2 options. And so I'll have 2 and then 1. 2 will be yes, it has evidence, and 1 will be no, it does not. And that's a really great thing about rubrics in Schoology is that each criteria can have its own separate grading scale. They can be as granular as you want, so it can have 10 with like 8.5, 9.5, all of that stuff, or evidence, just 1 and 2, that type of thing. I'm going to delete the descriptors for these rows for the reasoning, but I'll leave it at 22 points, and I'm satisfied with that. Another great thing about rubrics is that you can actually move these criteria around, and so if you decide, ooh, I did that in the wrong order and I want to rearrange them, you can absolutely just drag and drop them. And so that's that. You can also add learning objectives. If you have learning objectives in your course, you can add a learning objective that way. But I'm going to go ahead and create. And that is going to save my rubric. You'll notice that I already have a satire critique rubric. This is my 22.1 at the bottom that I just made. This little gray folder icon tells you how many assignments have this rubric attached to them. And Schoology will not let you delete a rubric if it's attached to an assignment, just FYI. So it tells you how many points the rubric is out of, so you know which one is yours, which one you just created. And if you want to edit, you can just click on it again, and it allows you to kind of go in and make any of the changes that you want. So that's how you create a rubric. We're going to move now into attaching a rubric to an assignment in particular. So we're going to start with a standard Schoology assignment, and I have some pre-made already. So for my rubric visible to students, I'm going to edit it so that you can see where to attach it. Where it says scale or rubric, it's going to default to whatever you put as the starred scale. Mine is numeric, so it defaults to that. I'm going to click this drop-down menu and scroll all the way down until I start seeing the rubrics that I've created. And again, rubrics are denoted by the little quad icon. I'm going to click my most recent one, and you'll notice that it tells you which criteria are listed there. And so claim, reasoning, evidence are there, as well as the fact that it automatically grays out these points, which means you cannot edit the points manually. However many points the rubric is set to is what it is going to set the assignment to. And so don't be alarmed that it grays out. That's how it's supposed to be. This little checkbox is something that you can check or uncheck if you want to show to students. It's typically because the rubric helps them understand your expectations. If it's something that you're using to grade and there are actually answers in the rubric, you would probably not show it to students. But let me just show you what it looks like when students are able to see the rubric. And so if I click on the assignment now, they can actually see the rubric in the instructions, and they can kind of scroll through and see where it belongs, all the different scores and things like that. Whereas if they were to select a rubric that is not visible to students, and so we've unchecked that box, the rubric is not visible in the instruction area. It is, however, still visible to you as a teacher, and so when you open the submission, you will obviously be able to access the rubric, which is quite nice. Another nice feature of standard Schoology assignments is that you can actually, after you've graded it, you can actually check that box to show to students, and then the rubric will appear in the instruction portion as kind of just a sense of what they should have gotten. So you can use it after you've graded. You can only make this kind of edit for assignments, and so just as an FYI, that cannot be done with assessments. Okay, so let me then show you how to actually grade using the rubric in a standard Schoology assignment. And make some recommendations about that as well. And so here we have the student submission. To submit a grade using the rubric, I'm going to hover on this little portion where it says the grade box. The little rubric icon is sitting there. I'm going to open that. And now I can just kind of select whatever score they're supposed to get. You'll notice that it auto-calculates based on the number of points that they receive, and so you can leave it like that, or if you want, you can actually click into this and override. So you might do that if, for instance, you want them to see what they would have gotten on a rubric, but you want to give them full points because it's a formative, and you don't want to dock them. You can also leave comments for each individual criteria, and there's this little speech bubble here where it's going to drop down and allow you to type in about to that particular criteria, and so you can do that for as many as you want or none, totally up to you. And you'll notice that if you have a really substantial rubric that has a lot of criteria and a lot of point values, it's going to obstruct the student work, and so what we recommend is to have two monitors, one that actually has the student work on one of the monitors, and the other monitor just has the gradebook where you can just open up the rubric and select the scores there. I'll show you what that looks like shortly. But we're going to go ahead and save this score. And so I just want to show you what it looks like for a student who has received feedback via the rubric. And so when I go into the gradebook and I scroll down and I click the little graph icon, this is what it looks like from the student perspective. And so this is their grade report. The grade comment is the gradebook comment that we're so commonly used to, but now the rubric has this little icon here, and so students can click on this, and it's going to pop out the rubric that shows the scores that they got for each criteria, and if they hover over each comment bubble, it'll tell them what the feedback was. The orange indicates that this is an overridden score, and so they can see that as well, which is really handy. Okay, so when you're doing this, right, this is the second half of our recommendation. If you have that one window at the bottom that has the student work in front of you and a second window on your second monitor where you can then have this gradebook pulled up, you can actually just click on the assignment and see the little rubric icon. It'll pop out the rubric in the gradebook, and you can score here, save that, and then move on to the next student, which is actually really convenient. And so that is our recommendation for dealing with the rubric potentially obstructing student work. Okay. Now, we're going to talk about attaching a rubric to a Google Drive assignment, because that looks slightly different than it does with a standard Schoology assignment. So you can tell this is a Google Drive assignment here. It follows the exact same attachment method, and so there is the scale rubric, right? I've added a Frankenstein response to this. I've allowed them to show it to students. So I'll save that. And when I click on it, this is what it looks like. Students can actually see the rubric written out here. This rubric is super granular, so it gets into the very small point values. Usual standard Google Drive assignment setup with students on the left side, student work. And then if you want to see the rubric and actually use it to grade, you would just click on this rubric button right here. It'll expand and push the rubric out. So this one doesn't obstruct student work when you're grading. You will have to scroll, obviously, but the nice thing is that you can actually just click through and select the score that you're looking for. Same features where you can have the comment for each criteria with the little speech bubble here. And then at the very bottom, there is the gradebook comment as it typically exists. You can go ahead and save the score. that's kind of a messy number, so I'm going to go in and overwrite that if I'm clicking there. And 23.7, I'll save that. And then I'll save it overall, and then it loads properly. So that's what it looks like for attaching a rubric to a Google Drive assignment and using that to grade. Okay, now we're going to talk about attaching a rubric to an assessment. And so I have an assessment with a single question here. Rubrics can only be attached to individual questions. It can't be attached to an assessment as a whole, so just keep that in mind. And obviously it can only be attached to questions that are something that you manually grade, and so this is a short answer essay question. When you go into the edit of the question, you would type your question out, and then at the very bottom there is this align rubric option, and then you can select the rubric that you want. And so I'm just going to select this test rubric, which has a bunch of random objectives plus this learning objective that I included. So this button here, little checkbox, tells you whether or not you can show it to students. And so you really need to be mindful of this when creating your assessment, because once students open the assessment and it generates a copy for them, you cannot change this option. And so if you are showing the rubrics to students, then once they open it, it's going to be shown to them forever. You can't take that back. So just be mindful of that when you're creating it. But you can also uncheck that, and you can just click save. And then if you were to have a student submission, you would then be able to go in and there would be a rubric, same way that the other assignments have. And so if we were to click on a student submission, I just went ahead and made one. This is what it'll look like. You'll have the response over here and then the view rubric option, which pops out. And then you can once again select all of the scores that you need. You can overwrite, you can do the comments, all of the above. Save that score, and then it'll automatically scale for you depending on what it's out of. And so that's a nice thing about assessments as well. Okay, so that covers assignments, Google Drive assignments, and assessments. So let's talk about sharing rubrics then. If we go into our grade setup, for each rubric that we have, you can click the little gear icon and click copy to course. With that in mind, it's probably easiest to just have people in your PLC added as members to your course and then make them admins so that they have access to the little gear icon next to the rubrics. They can select the rubrics that they want to copy, and so if they click the gear icon and click copy to course, they can select any course that they want and it'll copy over. That's if you want to do an individual rubric. If you want to give them all of your rubrics at once and they are admin on your course, then they can click the copy settings button, deselect categories and grading scales so that only rubrics are selected, and then find their course to copy it into, and they will copy all of the rubrics that are currently present. That is an option as well. If you want to just save it to your resources, click the gear icon again, click save to resources, and then it will save a rubric, and then you can import that into your future courses for later use. And so whatever is best for your PLC is kind of the way to go. That's really just the basics of rubrics, and so if you have any questions about creating an individualized rubric for yourself, please reach out to a Schoology teacher lead. We're happy to meet with you and help you work that out.